So decades ago, there are these three fathers in the waiting room at the hospital. They're waiting for their wives to give birth. They're nervous. It's before the imaging that could tell them everything that was taking place and what they could expect. So they're waiting news from behind the swinging double doors, and the nurse comes in and she announces to the first dad, "Congratulations, you've got twins!" And the husband says, "Well, that's just amazing because I work for the Minnesota Twins." Wow. A little bit later, the nurse comes in again and she says to the second husband, "Congratulations, you've got triplets." And the guy says, "Well, that's just really a coincidence because I work for the 3M company." And at that, the third husband fell off his chair unconscious to the floor, and the nurse shook him and revived him and asked if he was okay. He says, "Yeah, I'm fine, but I work for 7-Up." I thought about that story and I thought, imagine if he'd worked for Infinity. There's no end. The babies just keep coming. Oh my gosh. We're talking today about worry, about things that are coming down the pike that we may not know, we can't control. Worry is a big deal. I'll give you some statistics. 43% of adults suffer negative health issues due to worry. Worry-related health issues are skyrocketing among 18 and 23-year-olds. No shocker there, given the last couple of years. 50%, over 50% of hospital patients are chronic worriers, and some of you work in the health industry, and I've heard your stories about the wasted time spent with those patients. 75% of primary care doctor visits are stress-related, and there's a definite connection between stress and worry and anxiety. I'm going to use them all kind of interchangeably this morning. It's estimated that 275 million workdays a year are lost in America alone due to worry-related absenteeism. The worry hits people so hard they can't go to work, they can't focus on their job. 31 million Americans suffer insomnia, and anxiety or stress plays a major role in that. And if you've ever been through a stress-related time, you know how hard it can be to go to sleep. And as I said, all the stats I just shared are from a couple years ago. You can imagine they're even a lot higher now, given the COVID environment that we've been existing in the past 2 years. Literally, worry is killing people all across the world. And the best the world can offer is manage it. It's big business. It's $42 billion a year, and we have counseling programs for worry. We have prescription drugs, and they have gone through the roof in the past several decades. We got books, we got videos, we got seminars. It's big business helping us manage our stress and our anxiety. Now here's the question. Does worry have to be an inevitable part of your life? Does it have to be overwhelming? This brings us to our core verse today. We're going through a series called Core 52. A Bible college professor, a New Testament professor, Mark Moore, has said if you understand these core verses, you have a very good grasp of what the Bible teaches. And the Bible says a lot about worry. It's core to your discipleship and identity as a follower of Jesus. The Apostle Paul wrote in Philippians 4:6, "Don't be anxious about anything." Whoa, what if we just stopped right there? He hasn't got a clue what I'm facing. He hasn't got a clue what's up against me right now. Don't be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and petition with thanksgiving present your requests to God. The Apostle Paul is not an armchair counselor here. He's not some theoretician locked away in his academic office issuing edicts from on high as to how we're supposed to live. Paul was a practitioner. He could say these words as a representative, as an ambassador of Jesus, because he had lived them and experienced them. If you look at his biography, read through the book of Acts, just looking at what happened to Paul, he was shipwrecked. He knows what it is to wonder if he's going to get from here to there, if he's going to survive the storm. He was bitten by a poisonous snake on Malta to the point where everybody waited to see if he would die. It says right there in Acts 28, they waited to see if his body would bloat up. And when it didn't, they worshiped him as a god. He had been whipped on several occasions. He'd been beaten. He'd been stoned and left for dead. He'd been the target of murder plots. The Apostle Paul knew what it was to wonder if he's going to get from A to B alive. And yet he says worry is optional. He says don't worry. He says worry is a choice. Where did he ever get that idea from? Well, you knew it. We'd have to go back to Jesus. At least 12 times in the Gospels, Jesus said, don't worry. At least 17 times he said, don't be afraid. And yet how much of our lives are consumed with exactly those very things? Somehow we think we're the exception. Well, he didn't know what I was going through. Well, he did know what you would go through. And what he went through was a lot worse, and he didn't worry about it. Overcoming worry isn't just a mental health issue. It's not just a physical health issue. According to the Scripture, it's essential to your spiritual health. Worry doesn't have to keep you awake at night, pacing the floor and creating tension headaches and stomach ulcers. Worry, here it comes. You'll hate me for this. I'm sorry. Worry is an act of disobedience that attacks God's purpose for your life. There, I said it. You can hate me now. Worry is an act of disobedience that attacks God's purpose for your life. So if you're concerned about fulfilling God's purpose for your life and you have worry, the intent of the message today is not to beat you up. It's to encourage you to look at it differently. Like, okay, gee, if this is affecting my spiritual life, maybe I should approach it differently. I hope that's what you walk away from here with. I think you'll agree with me that these last 2 years have been a fertile breeding ground for worry and anxiety. Any disagreement there? It's probably the worst I've ever experienced, and I'm old. Do I wear a mask? Don't I wear a mask? Is the government telling the truth? Are they lying? The science says one thing. This scientist says another thing. What about people not wearing a mask? Should I worry about them? What if I get sick? What if a loved one gets sick and dies? And we've experienced that right here in our congregation. So several of you have lost loved ones to this whole COVID thing. So you got the whole COVID thing, but throw in some political turmoil. Were the elections real? People have concerns about that. What about the midterms coming up? Are we going to have a repeat in this fall as to what just happened this past year, which was horrible for America? Will Trump come back? Can I just say it? Is he going to come back? Whether you like him or don't like him, there's going to be some anxiety in our country and in our world if that happens. What about inflation? We have businessmen and business people in our midst and watching. The price of fuel is over $4 a gallon now. In Canada, it's going higher. That affects absolutely everything we pay for. Something to worry about. What about Russia and the Ukraine? Just this morning, I just flipped on and read a headline. Huge mistake, but the Russians chased off a U.S. sub. Like, whoa, we are like that close, and President Biden actually said the 3 word. He said it. We could be coming up on World War III. That's going to create some tension. And then, of course, there's the normal stuff that we worry about every day. What about my job? What about my family? What about my relationships? What about my kids? They're in college. They're starting their careers. They got this. They got that. What about my stuff? What about how am I going to pay my mortgage? What about my IRA? The stock market's going down. I can worry about that. You know, there's no end to the number of things that you can just keep yourself awake at night worrying about. And here come Paul and here come Jesus, and their words are way beyond a mere suggestion. They're not just saying, look, you might want to do this. They're commands. Worry is a matter of spiritual faithfulness. Worry is sin. The verb form in the passage we just read in Philippians is stop it. It's a command. And when I hear stop it, I think immediately of Bob Newhart's skit. If you haven't seen that, you got to Google it. He got this skit, it's about 5 minutes long, and he's a psychologist, and this gal comes in, and for like $5, she gets 5 minutes, he doesn't make change, and he'll solve all her problems. And I think her initial issue is she's claustrophobic. And you know his advice, you've seen it, what's his advice? Just stop it. Just stop it. I mean, I have laughed about that for you. I'm a horrible counselor. If you come in to get counseling from me, at some point I'm just going to say, go watch this, and this is just stop it. Worry isn't just a modern issue, though. Worry is as old as time. I go back to Abraham and Hagar. Remember, God said it to Abraham, as an old man, I'm going to give you a son, and a great nation's going to come from him. And years go by and nothing happens. And so what do? They get worried, they get stressed, they get anxious. Well, God clearly isn't going to do it, so we'll do it. We'll give God a kid through Hagar, who became Ishmael, who became the Arab nations today, and the impact continues down through the ages. But they were worried that God would not come through, so they took matters into their own hands, which is exactly what you've done. Come on now, at least once, come on. Look at those hands. Hands are going up all over the auditorium. Actually, not a single hand. You bunch of liars. Here's your post-sermon question I'd like to throw out for some conversations after the message. When did worry cripple you? That'd be a good conversation. When can you look back? And I think it's okay to confess this stuff to each other. When was I really crippled with worry, and how did it work out? Maybe you did take matters into your own hands, and you learned that that wasn't the brightest thing to do. And did it teach you something about trusting God, or did it work out after all? And you went, wow, that God, he really can be trusted. Paul says, with God's help, you can overcome worry. So I hope to help you do that a little bit today. Where I want to go now is give you 3 reasons why worry is sin and 3 remedies. And these come from my buddy Dan Raymond. You haven't heard that name in a while. He's a preacher in Missouri, and we think alike, and so I use a lot of his stuff, but this comes from Dan. Number 1, why worry is sin, is worry separates you from what matters most. Worry takes your eyes off God. You focus on whatever the issue is until it's all you can see. It consumes you until you take ownership of you, and it's up to you to take care of this. You kind of leave God out of the picture altogether. This comes from Jesus, Matthew chapter 6, the Sermon on the Mount. Verse 25, I tell you, don't worry about your life, what you're going to eat, what you're going to drink. Don't worry about your body, what you're going to wear. Is not life more important than food, and the body more important than clothes? We spend so much time worrying about things that we cannot change when that energy can be used so much more productively. Worry is kind of like fog. The National Institutes of Science and Technology, if you've ever noticed in Astoria, Oregon, where we are, in case you're watching online, it gets foggy here quite a bit. We like looking at our bridge and wondering, where's it going today? Because it just kind of disappears. Ships disappear. They look like ghost ships. If you've ever tried to drive late at night or early morning, taking 30 or 26, heading to Portland area, you know about the fog. Do you know that the National Institute of Standards and Technology says that fog that is 7 city blocks long and 100 feet deep, so it's big enough to cover the ships and the bridge and the buildings, is less than a glass of water. So you just take 7 blocks in Astoria. Let's just take it from 7th Street down to, what would 7 blocks be? 14th.
Actually 15, because there's not a 13th.
There's not a 13th?
Not on commercial, it's in the alley.
I never knew that. Wow. This is why you don't want to miss a Sunday morning at Astoria Christian Church. You learn that there's no 13th Street. Wow. Fog that is 7 blocks long, 8 not including 13th Street. This is all the water that's in that fog that causes you to slow down and wonder if you're going to hit something and turn your headlights on low beams. You take all the water droplets that are in this glass and smash them down into the nitty-gritty, little bitty pieces of it. It's like estimated 70 billion drops of water out of a glass this size is all it takes to cripple a city. Wow. That's what worry does. Next time you're driving in the fog, think about this. This is what worry does. It takes something small and it breaks it into its most nitty-gritty parts until it clouds your vision and it keeps you from seeing the most important things. Now the remedy is just give your worries to God. That's what Paul said in Philippians, don't be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your request to God. He's not denying there's going to be stresses in your life. He knows we're all going to face stresses of various kinds. But he's saying how you keep them from overwhelming you, and he uses 3 synonyms here, 3 words that mean the same thing, basically, prayer, petition, or request. Your translation might say supplication or wants. But the idea is the same. Prayer is the idea of intercession for other people. Just praying for whoever it is that you're concerned about. It might be a loved one that's got COVID or that might get COVID or that's going through something. Some of you have recently lost relatives, and this would be what you would do. You pray for them and the survivors and the families and what's going on. Supplications or requests. These are urgent pleas. God, something needs to happen here and I can't do anything about it and need you to do that. I know some of you are praying especially for the Ukraine. Something needs to happen to calm that situation down. Christians all over the world are praying, please God, do something. It's completely out of our control. Requests would pretty much be everything else. Paul says you do these things. You take your concerns for other people. You take your concerns for the emergencies. You whatever you can't handle, just take it to God and just give it to God. Where do you have to do this? Some people like to come in during the week and they'll sit in a pew here in the church building and they'll say, I just want to spend some time prayer. That's fine. There's nothing magical about the building, but for whatever reason, this is where they sense God's presence. I like to go up to my upper office at the column. The other day, I had to clear my soul. I had some things that were just stealing my peace that I've got going on, and I just had to practice what I'm saying right here. I took a drive all the way as far as you could go to Oysterville, the other side of the river, and like my friend in Canada that I mentor, he's like, you're a lazy butt. Get back in your office. Yeah, I've done a good job with him. He said, what do you do that for? I said, I just had to drive. And for me, driving is therapeutic because sometimes I turn the radio on, I'm rocking out to the 60s or 70s like an old geezer. And then all of a sudden, something inside just says, enough, turn the radio off. And it's just me and God. And I would be embarrassed if you sat in the back seat. I would not want you to hear that because it gets ugly. But I will yell at God. I will shout at God. I will cry. I've had to pull over sometimes and just get the tears out of my eyes. It's just me and God for whatever's going on in my life. And there's a whole lot of things, just like you. You got a whole lot of things. If you thought about it too much, you'd go nuts. So driving is an area that I like to do it. Some of you like to hike and you take walks, or you go and find a pretty place, or you go fishing, or whatever it is. It doesn't matter. Just you got to find a place where you can just give the stuff over to God, and there's a sense of relief afterwards. Nothing has changed. but everything's changed. The other place I like to do this is in bed. I sometimes can't sleep, and I'll just sit there and just, okay, God, who do you want me to pray for? And I'll just let things float through my brain. And this is not out loud. I don't want to disturb her. And sometimes when I wake up early and it's not time to get out of bed, I'll just, same sort of thing. What this does is it returns you to trusting God. That's where you want to get. When you're worrying and it's consuming you, what you're doing is saying, God, right now in this situation, I'm not trusting you. And that's not where he wants you to be. Satan loves it. Satan loves to distract you. Satan does not want you to trust in God. Satan wants to get you to obsess over a worry, and that will leave you with no energy or desire for God's bigger plan for your life. But prayer slams the door shut on Satan. So give your worries to God. The second thing that tells us that worry is sin is worry forgets that God knows what you need. Worry makes you think it's all up to you. Jesus goes on in Matthew 6:26, look at the birds of the air. They don't sow or reap or store away in barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not much more valuable than they are? Birds and flowers, for the most part, are on their own. But boy, they are prolific. And I belong to some Facebook pages. They are beautiful. I love some of the really weird-looking birds that pop up on my feed every day. They never worry, and yet they do just fine. One author wrote, worry is a thin stream, or anxiety is a thin stream of fear trickling through the mind. If encouraged, it cuts a channel into which all other thoughts are drained. Some of you, I'm afraid, you've got some deep channels. You've just let worry just cut a canyon through your soul. God says, nah, that's not how I want you to live. No, what's the remedy? The remedy is thankfulness. Be thankful for what God has already given you. And this is huge. Paul adds 2 words when he says prayer, supplication, and request in the verse we just looked at in Philippians 6. Did you catch the 2 words that followed that? He said, with thanksgiving. Give God glory for what he's already done for you. You see, worry makes blessings disappear. When you're worried, you forget the good things that God has already done. It results in what I call spiritual amnesia. We get so focused on what's in front of us and what we can't control that we forget how many times God has just come through and taken care of us in amazing ways. And so let remembering his faithfulness steer you to trust him now. What he's done in the past. Remember that. Thanksgiving relieves the pressure of anxiety, and it gives you assurance, which is what we all need. Back in the 30s, they were building the Golden Gate Bridge. And the guy that was building it realized that they were going to lose a couple dozen lives on this thing. He said, it's going to cost more money, but I think we ought to put a safety net under that thing. The officials didn't want to because it was going to raise the budget. But they paid the money, they put the safety net under it, they saved dozens of lives, very few fatalities on that. And what do you think the nets did? They gave assurance to the workers that they could move about the structure hundreds of feet up in the air above the dangerous waters of San Francisco Bay. And if they fell, and some did, and there's cool pictures of that on the internet. Some fell, the net caught them. They bounce around a little bit, climb back up, go back up, get back to work, riveting or welding or turning bolts, whatever it is that they were doing. And what they discovered was because the workers had the assurance that they weren't going to be hurt, they worked more efficiently, they worked more confidently, and it actually lowered the overall cost of the Golden Gate Bridge because they had no fear of falling. And this is true for you when you choose to trust in God. God says, I got a safety net under you. I'm going to catch you. It's okay. The problem is we kind of walk along the girders going, and we kind of get paralyzed. And maybe what we just need to do is kind of, whoa! Ta-da! See? I'm fine. I'm okay. God caught me. See, that's scared you, didn't it? No. Look what Paul says in verse 7 of Philippians 4, and the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. He doesn't say God's going to say yes to all your prayers. Catch that. The promise is not that God's going to say yes to whatever you're asking him for. The promise is he'll give you his peace. Which means maybe even in the face of disappointment and pain, unspeakable agony, dead dreams, God says, I got this. Which is the exact opposite of worry. Guard. There's an interesting word. Guard your hearts and minds. What do you guard? Why do you guard something? Because it's valuable? And we have a spiritual enemy who's wanting to take what is valuable and he wants to steal that from you. And what is valuable and that what he detests is the peace and the confidence and the trust that you express in God. A whole nother part of the sermon, not going to go into, but there are spiritual witnesses watching your life. And when they see you expressing faith and confidence in a situation that you would normally not, they're high-fiving. They're going, Jesus is up there going, he's got it, he got it. That's my interpretation of it. Lastly, worry doesn't work. It's a waste. It's a waste of time and energy. It's unhelpful. It's unproductive. Matthew chapter 6, verse 27, Jesus says, who of you by worrying can add a single hour to his life? It's a rhetorical question. He knows what the answer is. 2019, Penn State did a study that said 40% of the worries that you have never happen. 30% are concerns in the past that you can't undo anyway. And oh my gosh, if you've ever met someone that lives in the past, isn't it painful? Like, just get over it. You can't undo it. It's done. Stop replaying that tape. Boy, there's a lot of people that are addicted to past disappointments and hurts. And it's sad because they don't have to live there. 12% are needless health worries. 10% are petty concerns. Well, petty to me, they might be something to you, but they're petty to me. I don't know how they determine what's petty. 8% are actually considered legitimate. It's kind of like the woman that spent her entire life worrying about getting cancer. It was all she talked about. It was all she worried about. She was always going to the doctor and saying, this is it. I think I got it now. This is cancer. This is cancer. This is cancer. Her whole life was spent concerned that she was going to get cancer, and she finally died in her 80s of a heart attack. That's what worry does. It just robs you of everything. Not only is worry ineffective, it makes you ineffective. It paralyzes you. It makes you act in desperation to where you do something stupid or foolish. Someone very close to us recently let us know that they are facing a lot of stress and anxiety in their life. And so they went online and they talked to a tarot card reader. That's all I had to hear. Who knew interesting things about this person? How'd they know that? Obviously, they got Google up there. Look the name up real fast. You can find out stuff. Probably have a subscription to one of these people finder websites. You can pull up information in just a very short while. Or it could be that there are real demonic spiritual entities that know everything about you and are ready to use that to draw you away from God. Now, I know that sounds like hocus pocus. Oh my gosh, Jim's into Harry Potter now. Next thing you know, we'll all be playing Quidditch. No, 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 no. Over and over again, Old Testament and New Testament, the Bible says divination is wrong. What is divination? Big fancy word, means trying to learn the future through a means other than what God has revealed. That's why the word divine is in there. It's seeking knowledge that is only allowable by God. And so I heard this story, and I'm like, oh, I can't believe they're doing this. And my heart breaks. Because you see, that stuff gets addictive. And then you want to know more, and you want to know more. And Astoria and the Pacific Northwest is loaded with spiritualists, mediums, tarot card readers. You know them, you drive by them, you see them, we're neighbors with them, for Pete's sake. They're everywhere. And I'm here to say that is evil and demonic, and you should never even play with it because it's real. And the Bible condemns it in the most uncertain, certain, definitive, don't mess with it ways. And so if God warns against something, I take that seriously. I was on the bridge the other day, had a traffic accident, almost made it across that on the drive when I went to clear my soul. I'm coming back, and I'm so close to the top of the bridge, and I see the red lights and the blue lights. They just had like a 3 or 4 car accident. I was stuck there for half an hour. So what do you do when you're stuck in a traffic jam around here? You go on Facebook to the scanner page and say, who knows what's going on the Megler Bridge? And lo and behold, there were people saying there's a multi-car accident up there, and a gal was behind me. And so I checked out to see who she was, and she was a medium and a spiritualist. So I asked her, well, how long is this wreck going to be here? No, I did not do that. Worry paralyzes us to where we can't do anything, or it can lead us to seek answers from the wrong sources. And the only source, of course, is Jesus Christ and the Scriptures. Worry actually comes from an old German word meaning choke or strangle. I did not know that. Just think about that. Worry chokes you, it strangles you, it chokes your ability to live the life that God intended for you. It changes nothing for you. It just slowly kills you. WebMD says worry is the leading cause in most causes of death. Heart attacks, cancer, lung disease, accidents, suicide, depression, ulcers, irritable bowel syndrome, skin conditions, chronic headaches, high blood pressure, digestive disorders, sexual dysfunction, and on and on and on. Worry plays a major role in every one of those illnesses. Worry cannot add a single hour to your life, but it sure can take years off. Isn't it time to say goodbye to worry if this is something you've wrestled with? The remedy is focused on the positive. Philippians 4:8. Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about these things. Whatever you've learned or received or heard from me, Paul says, look at my life. You've seen what I've been through. You know what I've been through. I'm on the other side of it. You can trust me. He says, if you've learned anything from me, put it into practice, and the God of peace, there it is again, the second time in 3 verses, the God of peace will be with you. Worry sets your mind on everything that can possibly go wrong. You play out all these scenarios. And then physiologically, you react to them as if they were realities. And Paul says, no, set your mind on things that are good. And scripture memory and the promises and the nature of God are extremely helpful here. I put a post up on Facebook a couple days ago and said, how have you handled worry? And if you look through those, quite a few are right there. There's one gal that I went on a mission trip with years ago to Haiti. Says she and her daughter now who's having worry issues. So they make a list. They sit down and they list out every day, well, this is what I'm worried about. And then they put it in a box. and they give the box to God. A tangible, practical way for them to realize, okay, I'm giving these worries to God. I thought that was pretty cool. Now let me say this, just as a caveat, there is a legitimate time to complain. I'm not saying if you ever whine or complain or moan to God that that's wrong. That might sound counterintuitive, that might sound hypocritical, but no, there are times to get it out with God. Have you ever read the Psalms? You read the Psalms, if you've never read them, you're going to go like, holy cow, what's that doing in there? You can talk to God like that? Read Psalm 37 or Psalm 73. These guys are going, God, I don't even think you exist. I don't even think you care about me. I think worshiping you and serving you is just hooey. That's the Dewar paraphrase. It's all right to gripe to God, but don't live there. You know, if you take a gun and you look down the sights, where's the bullet going to go? Where it's pointed. Generally. And if everything in your life is aimed at the negative, is aimed at what if, you're just going to have a direction that's not fun to go. Sing your sad song, complain to God, get it out, then give it to Him, like the box idea, and aim your life at something good. Verse 9 says, and the peace of God will be with you. Bruce Larson used to minister in New York City. He wrote a book called Believe and Belong. And he would counsel church members and people kicking the tires at faith, and they would come in and they had huge decisions to make, and it was just keeping them up at night. He said what he used to love to do was he would take them to Rockefeller Center there in New York City. If you've ever been there, there's a humongous statue of Atlas, the strongest guy in the world. And what's he doing? He's holding the world up. Now, he's straining to do it. I mean, it's work for him to do that. So Bruce Larson says, I would take people to look at this, and I would say, no, this is one way that you can live your life. You can hold your world up by your own strength. And then he would go across the street to St. Patrick's Cathedral, and he says, hidden behind the altar, way in the back, was this other statue of Jesus. And I got to say, it's not a very impressive statue. I was a little bit disappointed when I saw this statue. But it's a statue of Jesus who looks more like a 14-year-old choir boy, but he's holding the world in one hand. And Bruce Larson used to tell his people, he'd say, okay, the choice is yours. You can hold the world up on your own shoulders and let it crush you. Or you can give it to Jesus and say, it's yours. Do with it what you want. The question this morning for you, and hopefully you've answered this, and this whole time has just been a reaffirmation and re-encouragement to you because you're there. Hopefully the choice for you is which way you want to live. Up to you. Up to Jesus. And my hope and prayer is that for those of us who are already followers of Jesus, we would pick this one. And for those of you that maybe have yet to say yes to Jesus Christ, man, you will never, ever regret letting Jesus Christ hold your world up. Let's sing.